before this meeting began, I I was walking across this room, and I was even closing my eyes, and I was walking around. So when I was walking up and down, I used to tell this to everyone, okay? Surrender is you closing your eyes and walking and trusting God. And today, when I was trying to do it, Holy Spirit said, excuse me, that is not surrender. Surrender is not you walking in the unknown, but surrender is you walking on a path where your Father has already walked before. Surrender is not you hitting blind spots, you playing a guess game, and you're like, I have completely surrendered and I don't know what is happening. No, surrender is knowing that you serve a Father, you serve a God who has walked before you, who has made a way for you, who has erased every mountain from your path, who has raised every valley. That is surrender. And this is something that Jacob never understood. He never understood, and he was sitting and striking a deal with God. He's saying, God, it's okay, you gave this amazing promise to me, but this is where I strike a deal. If you do this for me, then you will be my God. And the next chapter, the first verse says that Jacob went on his journey. Excuse me, Jacob, did you not just say that surely this is the place where God is? This was a statement, right? Surely this is the place where God is, not was. And yet, Jacob was so hardened that he left God standing there. A God who came to him with a promise saying that I will not leave you until I fulfill my promise to you. I will not leave you until I bless you and I finish what I've promised for you. He said, this is where God is. Surely this is the place where God is. And yet, first verse in the next chapter, after this crazy encounter which Mr. Grabber has with God, he just walks off. He journeys ahead. And then if you read the story of Jacob, he goes to his uncle's house, and there he spends 20 years of his life where he marries, he ends up in a wrong marriage, and then he ends up in the right marriage, then he has sons, and then he has servants of his wives who he has married. He has sons from them, and he is slogging 20 years of his life. Okay, there's a lesson to learn here. Many of us think that surrender is costly. But let me tell you, the cost of not surrendering is more than the cost of your surrender. Every stage of this man's life, Jacob, if you read his story, every time God would come and give him dreams, God would bless him with ideas. And yet, this man never came to a point where he said that, God, you take charge of my life. 20 years passed by. 7 years he waited for one wife, another 7 years gone waiting for the same wife, and then 14 years gone, 6 years now he's taking care of the cattle of his uncle. And his life was miserable. 20 years. At the end of 20 years, okay, from that night's encounter, 20 years have passed. At the end of 20 years, Jacob was blessed. He had wives, he had children, he had cattle. But I want to show you one verse. The cost of not surrendering. This is Genesis chapter 31, verse 40 to 41. Genesis chapter 31, verse 40 to 41. After 20 years, and after being so called blessed in the eyes of the world, this is what this man is saying. He's saying, "This was my situation. By day the heat consumed me, and by night the cold, and I could not sleep. These 20 years I have been in your house, I have served you, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Did you see the cost of not surrendering? In the eyes of the world, Jacob is a blessed man. He has everything. But behind the scene, what a painful story. He's saying that 20 years of my life, not 2 years, not 12 years, 20 years of my life, I could not sleep. I could not sleep. I never had peace. And while everybody else could see the blessing on Jacob's life, Jacob never ever approached God. There came a point where this cruel uncle Laban, he goes to Jacob and he makes this statement. He says, "Please stay with me. For I have learnt by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake." So look at this. A Gentile, he is looking at the life of Jacob and he is realizing that it's not Jacob, it's somebody else's hand that is carrying him. It is somebody else's mighty hand that is upon this man's life, and whatever blessings are in my life is because of him. A Gentile could identify it, yet Jacob, little Jacob, never understood it. He went on with his life. He went on with his pain. And my question is, why do we make that mistake where we, end up surrendering where we have paid a heavy price? Why do we bring ourselves? Why are we so disconnected with God that we bring ourselves to a point where everything is taken away from us, our peace, our sleep, our joy, our possessions, and then we lift our hands and say, "God, we surrender." When it's a dead end, we lift our hands and say, "God, we surrender." I told you, you are a different breed. Because your level of surrender will be different. Because you and I will not wait for the dead end to surrender. But what is the good part? You begin with surrender. Isn't that the simplest thing? So you don't have to get hard knocks. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to go through heartbreaks and pain in your life. Because from beginning, you have been partnering with God. Isn't that a better deal? I wish this little Jacob could understand it, but he didn't. He saw God in that place and he walked away. He suffered for 20 years of his life. And now his uncle is he is not on a friendly term with Jacob. And Jacob could see that in his eyes. And yet the same God comes to Jacob and says, "Jacob, it's time for you to leave." All throughout these 20 years, this God of Abraham, God of Isaac, never left him. He was so committed to his promise. And what did Jacob do? All the time he was just striking deal. He was just taking ideas, prospering, but never coming to a point where he's saying that, "God, I want you to drive my life." He never was coming to that point. And now Now it's almost like a dead end. You know how I just reminded of this picture how, surrender works. It's like this man, it's pitch dark. He's standing at the edge of the cliff and he slips. It's pitch dark and he cannot see anything. And then he realizes that he is falling and he puts his grip on some piece of rock and he's clinging there. And the night is long and he's clinging there. And God is like, leave your hands, surrender. Like, no way. I don't know where I'll land up. And he's clinging on there, he's clinging on there. And every time God is coming to him and he's saying, surrender, surrender. Because you remember what I said? Can a child ever fall from God's hands? Even if you fall, I will be there to catch you. But this man, he never let go, and he stood there strong, and his hands were damaged and there was blood coming out, and now it was daybreak. And almost his bones break, but he was clinging there, clinging there. And now he cannot do it anymore. And he lets go of it. And imagine he just lands safely because the ground level was just 1-2 feet down. That was the end point of the cliff. And all the time what God was telling him was, surrender, let go. And the same is Jacob's story. The same is our story, where every moment this God is coming to you and saying, let go and let God. You do the principle and then the principle does. Did you get that? You do the principle. Listen, you do the principle, then the principle will do. Did you get that? Your job and my job is to trust God and follow His principles, do what He's saying. And then the principles of God are so effective, they will bring you the fruit. Do the principle will do it for you. But what do? We wrestle with God.